Okay, picture this. We're on the outskirts of Medina, and on the horizon, you see this massive cloud of dust. It's not a sandstorm, it's an army, a colossal army right at the city's doorstep.
And we're not talking about just any army. The sources say this was a confederation of 10,000 warriors, gathered from all over the Arabian Peninsula. I mean, to put that in perspective, that was an almost unimaginable number back then, and they were all brought together for one single reason.
Their goal was brutally simple. This wasn't about loot. It wasn't a raid. It was a mission to completely annihilate the Muslim community. Their very existence was hanging by a thread. So you have this massive, seemingly unstoppable force marching on the city, totally expecting to just roll over it. But when they got there, they just stopped. They were completely stunned, confused, because something they had never seen before was blocking their path.
Now, to really appreciate how shocking this moment was, we've got to back up a little and look at how this huge army even came together in the first place. This wasn't some random mob. It was a very carefully built alliance.
So who were the architects? Well, the source points to the Banu Nadir. They were a tribe that had been expelled from Medina, and now they were burning for revenge. So first, they go to their old allies, the Quraysh of Mecca. Then, they systematically went around convincing other powerful tribes, like the Qatafan, to join in, creating this massive confederacy, all aimed at one common enemy.
Okay, so you're the Muslims in Medina. You're facing this overwhelming force. You are ridiculously outnumbered. A straight-up, conventional battle, that would have been a slaughter. So they needed a radical, totally unconventional plan, and they needed one like yesterday.
And the solution came from a pretty unexpected source, a companion named Salman al-Farsi. He suggested an idea from his homeland Persia, a defensive strategy that was totally unheard of in Arabian warfare. Not a wall, but a giant trench designed to make the enemy's biggest advantage, their cavalry, completely and utterly useless.
And the scale of this thing was just monumental. We're talking about a trench that was nearly 6 kilometers long. It was so wide a horse couldn't jump it, and deep enough that it was a serious obstacle. And get this, they had to dig it in just 6 days, all while dealing with a brutal famine. It was so bad people were tying stones to their stomachs just to fight off the hunger pangs.
Amidst all this struggle, the source talks about this incredible moment. The diggers hit a rock that just seemed impossible to break. The Prophet Muhammad is said to have struck it himself, and with each hit, he announced visions of future victories. Now, for the believers, this was a huge morale boost, a sign from God. But for the hypocrites among them, it was apparently just something to mock, this impossible fantasy. So the trench is finished just in time. The enemy arrives, and they are stopped cold. It's a stalemate. But just when it looked like the crazy plan was actually working, the whole situation was about to become infinitely more terrifying.
For days, you can just imagine the frustration of the Confederate army. They couldn't get across the trench. Their cavalry, their pride and joy, was useless. The best they could do was set up camp on the other side and just fire arrows across, hoping to wear the defenders down. The unconventional plan had worked, creating a total standoff.
You see, the biggest threat wasn't those 10,000 warriors camped outside the city. No, the real existential danger was already inside the city's walls. It was a betrayal that was about to blow everything wide open. To get why this was so devastating, you have to understand something called the Treaty of Medina. It was basically a mutual defense pact. Every tribe living in the city, and this included the Jewish tribe of Banu Qurayza, who had strong fortresses in the south, had all promised to protect Medina together as one community.
Well, that promise was shattered. According to the account, the Banu Qurayza broke the treaty. They made a secret deal with the invading army. Their plan was to attack the Muslim families, the women and children, from the rear, right when the fighters were pinned down at the trench. This would create a terrifying two-front war.
The sheer terror of this moment is captured right in the Quran. A verse in Surah Al-Ahzab, which is actually named after this battle, describes this feeling of absolute desperation, being caught between a massive army in front of you and a new enemy at your back. It was a moment where it says they were violently shaken.
With brute force now totally off the table, the solution had to come from somewhere else entirely. This wasn't going to be won with swords and shields, but with strategy, with intelligence, and with a masterful bit of psychological warfare.
The key player in all of this was a man named Nuaym ibn Mas'ud. Now, he was a respected leader from one of the attacking tribes, the Ghatafan, but here's the crucial part. He had just recently and secretly converted to Islam. Nobody on the enemy side knew. This made him the perfect double agent to go in and tear the alliance apart from the inside.
So what did he do? It was brilliant, really. He went to each side and played on their biggest fears. He goes to the Banu Qurayza and says, "Look, the Quraysh aren't from here. They're going to get tired of this siege and leave, and you'll be left holding the bag. You should demand some of their nobles as hostages, just as a guarantee." Then he goes over to the Quraysh and says, "Hey, listen, the Banu Qurayza are having second thoughts. They're going to ask you for hostages, but it's a trap. They plan to hand them over to the Muslims to get back in their good graces." It was a perfect checkmate.
So now, with the enemy alliance completely crippled by suspicion and mistrust, the stage was set for the final act. This siege had dragged on for weeks, and it was about to completely collapse, not just from the division inside, but from a little pressure from the outside.
As the story goes, a divine intervention came next. A violent, freezing wind ripped through the desert night. The sources describe a storm so powerful, it tore their tents from the ground, it blew sand in their faces, it put out all their fires, plunging their whole camp into total chaos and panic.
They were already exhausted, they were starving, and now they were completely mistrustful of each other. This storm was the final straw. The great Confederate army just broke. They fled in total disarray, and just like that, the siege was over. The Banu Qurayza, who had broken their promise and were now abandoned by their supposed allies, were left all alone, and they surrendered.
This victory was a massive, massive strategic turning point. It basically marked the last time that the tribes of Arabia will be able to put together such a huge force to attack Medina. From this moment on, the whole dynamic shifted. The Muslims went from defending their very existence to going on the offensive. Which really leaves us with a pretty fascinating thing to think about, right? This whole conflict, with thousands of lives and the fate of an entire community hanging in the balance, it all came down to a ditch, a clever lie, and a bad storm. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often does the entire course of history pivot on such a razor-thin line?